This is episode number 44 of the Silver Track Extra.
Thanks for tuning in to the Silver Track Extra, your source for the best tips, tricks, and how-tos to dominate the security industry. Helping you improve your business, win more contracts, and crush your competition. Here are your hosts, Chris Anderson and Johnny Page.
What's up, Silver Track Nation? Johnny Page here, along with Chris Anderson on episode number 44 of the Silver Track Extra. Today, we're in part 3 of our 4-part series in the ultimate guide to running your security dispatch center. And today, Chris, we're talking about finding the right vendor and really setting yourself up for success. So we're assuming now you've made the decision to outsource. Of course, if you haven't made the decision to outsource, next week's episode is all about how to launch an in-house call center. But this is a good point of reference whether you're going in-house or you're outsourcing. Some amazing things to consider here that probably go into really when you're considering the pricing breakdown and whether or not it's a good idea to go with the outsourced or a third-party call center. So, Chris, what are some of the things that we need to be looking for when we're searching for the right vendor?
Well, we talked about this in episode 1 and 2, but number 1 is going to be the cost, of course, but you need to evaluate why you need a call center. What's the reason for you going out and looking for somebody to handle your dispatch calls? So a lot of it, as when I had my company, it was because I had residential committees or homeowner association, as I mentioned before. So if you're going to go that direction, you got to consider their experience in the industry. And what I did is I actually reached out to other security company partners or vendors that were using centers to kind of streamline that process.
And so, you've got to find someone that has taken some security calls before, right? There's several resources out there. Make sure that and if they haven't had experience in security, that there's someone that shows potential in that area. You know what it's like. You have expertise in the security industry. Make sure that when your customers are calling into this call center, that it still feels like they're a part of your company. Right? You don't want it just to be a very bland answering service that has no idea about the nature of the calls, because a lot of times these are frustrated residents or tenants or homeowners that are calling in, and you need to have someone that can be sympathetic, they can understand the nature of the situation, and then give them an idea of the action that's going to take place as a result of the phone call.
Yeah, you're going to have to find somebody that's experienced, John. A typical answering service for after hours is very short. Get a message out to whether it's a supervisor or the owner of the company. So, again, I would go directly to other security companies. When you're researching it online, make sure they do have that experience, because everybody runs their operation different.
So make sure you get some references to speak to. Yeah. They should have some companies that you can talk to, find out about some of the headaches that they had to go through in coming on board. Really dive in and learn as much as possible from the references that they give you, because it can tell you a lot about what it would be like to work with that company. And if we can avoid some headaches, well, we absolutely want to.
Yeah, you have to. You're going to have to look at their software programs they're using, because you need to know, because we don't have, or security companies don't have a budget to spend a lot of money for a call center. So if they're going to take calls and they're going to charge by calls, you better make sure that they have a system to track that for you so you can see what you're getting, what you're paying for.
Another question you'll want to ask in the research process is find out how they report incoming calls and what those daily reports look like when you, as a result of their service. So their shift ends, you come in, how do you see what calls were taken and what actions need to be had? Are they flexible? Will they jump into your system? Like if you're using SilverTrack or you're using a CRM, will they jump into your system and report that? Do you have to go into theirs? Are they simply shooting over emails? What are their reporting procedures? Because that's going to have a big impact on how your operation runs, because you're going to need to fit that mold, or you're going to need them to fit what you already have set up.
Yeah, you don't want to pay for calls or hangups, right? Because a lot of them will track by the number of times the phone rang by that number, right? And they'll count it as a call when in reality it didn't spend 2 minutes. It could be a wrong number, and you certainly don't want to pay for that. Yeah,
and we strongly recommend going away from the per call basis, right? If you have to, you can. If it's not an option, you may not be able to avoid that. If you do, we'll have a future episode on how to reduce the number of phone calls that come in. There's certainly a lot of resources available to make sure that your residents, tenants, or your customers can call or can submit issues without having to call in. But yeah, definitely a way. And if you do have to go on the per call basis, make sure there's a quality assurance factor in there, that you aren't getting dinged for wrong phone numbers, or that your competitor is not just calling in and ringing up your bill.
Well, we talked about it before. If they're going to do that, then they should be willing to answer it as your company, right? That would be the benefit to me if I'm going to hire somebody. Number two, are they going to script the call, so no matter who's taking the call is speaking the same language? Or are they going to take the call, dispatch a call, and get a response back from the guard in the field? Is that all going to be noted? Is that considered a call, a complete call, right? So that's a service call to me, not just picking up the phone and then hanging it back up. So you need to define those terms in the beginning.
Another thing to flush out with them is how will they respond when true emergencies are reported? Can you set up a specific chain of escalation? What type of documentation do they need to have? You'll want to go through some sort of customer classification. You'll need some way to classify which customer is which. So if they call in, they have like an ID number. So that you're only taking valid requests and that they are responding the way that it's set up for that customer. So for example, you've got Shadow Hills apartment community, and the customer at that property wants you to respond to noise disturbances or calls for the police or whatever it may be. They want you to respond a specific way. If you don't have a way to match the customer that's calling with that specific account for the call center, it's going to be very difficult to deliver quality customer service, right? You're really going to end up resorting on the supervisors, which doesn't actually save you time or save you money.
Yeah, well, our listeners are going to be familiar with this. The big problem is complaints. When your client calls you and says, hey, you know what? A resident of mine called last night and they complained. They said your call center or your dispatch center was horrible. They treated them poorly. So I made it known that if somebody was going to take a call, that I wanted them to not only use a script, but I wanted them to say their last name and then give an ID number. So this is Mr. Anderson. My ID number is 8268. I'm going to go ahead and take this call. This call will be recorded, right? Like you heard before. You're letting the client know that the call is going to be recorded and tracked, right? For quality assurance purposes. It's the reason why they do that. Because number one, you're telling the caller, I'm going to track this. So if you try to lie to me, we're going to be able to follow up on the call. So that prevents a lot of those calls from coming in, people, because they know it's recorded. So that way nobody can just throw it out. So it's real important. That's one thing that was a major issue for me in the beginning.
Great point, Chris. Great point. And then we also we want to ask them, how is training and onboarding handled? What type of information do they need from you? What type of are you assigned an account manager? Are you just assigned like a tech support? Like, you really want to make sure that your customer experience is going to be a fluid one, that you can work with them and you guys can always be improving the service, and that there is some sort of quality assurance system set up to where if there are complaints, you can go back in, listen to the calls, maybe have a particular agent removed that is not delivering up to your standards. You just need to make sure that you have all of the training, the onboarding flushed out so that you can do as much research and know exactly what to expect before you cut that first check.
Yeah. You can also, John, ask the answering service how long they've been in business, and number two, what's your turnover of employees? So if you find out their employees or their agents taking the calls have been there 5 or 10 years, chances are they're running a pretty good operation, right? Mm-hmm. If they have a constant turn, you know that you're going to get a constant turn, which means it's training not only for you, but for them, right? So yeah, we need to find out how many individuals will be assigned to our account at all times. Is this going to be like a random, you could get one of any 100, or do you have a set couple that are going to be assigned to your account? How do they handle that, and how do they do their best to deliver a consistent experience for your customers? Yeah, well, residents, for an example, people like a familiar voice on the phone, right? So when you come, just like when you call say, hey, it's Johnny on the phone. Oh, great. Well, if your clients can do the same thing, at least have somebody for long term for, couple 3 or 4 months, that's good for the business.
Well, Silvertrack Nation, we're going to take a brief break and hear from our sponsors over at Paperless Proposal. But when we get back, I'm going to share 2 practices that I've personally put in place while outsourcing tasks for Silvertrack that I think that you will find very useful when you're considering outsourcing your call center. You're not going to want to miss that. Stay tuned and we'll jump right back into our feature conversation.
If you own a security business, I want to recommend a tool that will give you a big competitive advantage and help you win more clients. This powerful tool is Paperless Proposal Software. Paperless Proposal Software helps you create impressive business proposals in minutes, and it allows you to easily track and manage all of your proposals. Give your business a big competitive advantage by using Paperless Proposal Software. Get a free demo at www.paperlessproposal.com/Silvertrack.
Yeah, and so there's 2 cool tips for success that I think will be really significant in making sure that no matter which third party you select to outsource this to, that you position yourself to be as successful as possible. The first is to create a detailed record of call requests that are coming in. As you prepare to outsource this and you're doing your homework, go ahead and internally, whether it's your field supervisors, or it's someone internally at an in-house call center right now, make sure that you're recording the type of call requests that are happening and kind of creating a handbook for how each one of those situations needs to be handled, because you want to try and flush out a game plan for every possible situation that could be called, because then you limit your risk of a third-party call center reacting in a way that's not beneficial for your company, right? So just go ahead and start building that standard operating procedure now, that handbook, because whether you stay in-house or you go out or you outsource this, that's going to be a very valuable tool to make sure that there's a consistent customer service approach every time the phone rings.
Yeah, and with our software, with our dispatch module, we got a great module with Silvertrack, John. That if people use that correctly, they can really streamline their operation and they can introduce it to their call center. On top of that, you should be finding ways to always encourage people to go to the web, right? You got your call center. I know that's their business, but you should try to reduce those calls as much as possible so the calls they do get are as quality and short and it gets the job done if they need to make it.
Yeah. And then the second strategy, and you've mentioned this several times, I think it's a really significant key to success here, Chris, is making sure that you develop some scripts for just the common situations because if nothing else, if they're not followed 100% of the time, it at least sets the standard of what you expect when a third-party company is on the phone with your customers.
Yep. And if you develop a script, now this is for the listeners, if you develop a script and you develop a protocol and it's the same way every time, if your clients call or the contract manager calls your answering service and they experience this protocol, if they ever get a complaint that it wasn't handled properly, they know that, you know what, let me see. Every time I've called, I've always had a very good experience. I've got the name, the ID number, and at the end of the call, they always ask, did I answer all your questions? Can I help you further? Right? So if you can set that up correctly, it's going to prevent you a lot of problems in the future.
Well, guys, there is a much more detailed written article on this particular subject at silvertracksoftware.com/44. That's 44. There's also the ultimate guide to running your security dispatch center, which is an extremely packed ebook on everything that you need to really run a high quality security dispatch center, whether this is outsourced to a third party or you're running in-house. We've got things like job descriptions, how to maintain quality assurance, checklists on what type of information needs to be received for each call. Tons of good stuff that you won't want to miss out on. Visit silvertracksoftware.com/44 to download that ultimate guide. And until next time, my name is Johnny Page.
I'm Chris Anderson.
This is the Silvertrack Extra, and we'll talk to you soon.
This has been another episode of the Silvertrack Extra. For more insider information, visit silvertracksoftware.com/extra. Listen on the go by subscribing in iTunes. Want to hear your questions answered on the show? Visit silvertracksoftware.com/questions to submit your requests.